I cheated on my boyfriend, but I didn't know he had been watching me all along. My name is Emily Carter, and before you judge me, before you decide who the villain is in this story, I need you to listen until the end. Because even now, after everything that happened, I'm still not sure whether I was the one who destroyed my life, or if it was already falling apart long before I made my worst mistake. This story started 3 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Austin, Texas. At that time, my life was simple. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency, lived in a modest apartment with peeling paint and loud neighbors, and spent most of my free time at a local coffee shop called the Rusty Bean. It was my comfort place. I'd go there almost every day, order a vanilla latte, sit near the window, and work on freelance projects. That's where I met Jason. I remember the moment perfectly because it felt like something straight out of a movie. I was sketching logo concepts in my notebook when someone bumped into my table, spilling an entire cup of black coffee across my sketches. I gasped and jumped up. He froze, staring at the mess, his eyes wide with panic. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," he said immediately, grabbing napkins from nearby tables. That was my first impression of him. Tall, dark hair, calm voice. Expensive watch. The kind of confidence that felt natural, not forced. He insisted on buying me a new notebook. Then he bought me another coffee. Then he asked if he could sit down and make sure I wasn't secretly furious with him. I wasn't. In fact, we talked for 2 hours. Jason worked in real estate investment. He was articulate, attentive, and strangely good at listening. Not just pretending to listen, really listening. He remembered details. He asked follow-up questions. He laughed at my sarcastic jokes like he genuinely found them funny. When I left the coffee shop that day, he asked if he could see me again. I said yes. Within weeks, Jason became a constant presence in my life. He would bring me breakfast before work, send good morning texts, and surprise me with little thoughtful gifts. Once he drove across the city just to bring me soup when I had a cold. It felt safe with him. Stable. Certain. After 6 months of dating, I moved into his apartment downtown. It was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, soft ambient lighting that made every evening feel warm and intimate. That was the first time in my life I felt like I had everything figured out. But stability can sometimes hide silence, and silence can hide secrets. At first, the strange things were so small that I ignored them. Jason was extremely protective of his phone. He always kept it face down. If he left the room, he took it with him. If a message appeared while we were together, he would quickly swipe it away before I could even accidentally glance at it. I told myself it wasn't my business. Everyone deserves privacy. Then there were his sudden late work nights. Real estate deals, meetings with investors, emergency property issues. He always had an explanation, and his explanations always made sense. Still, there were moments that felt off. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and notice he wasn't in bed. I'd find him in the living room sitting in complete darkness, staring at his phone screen. The blue light would reflect on his face, making him look almost emotionless. When I asked what he was doing, he would smile and say he couldn't sleep. And I believed him. Everything changed when I lost my job. The marketing agency downsized after losing several major clients. I was called into the manager's office on a Friday afternoon and handed a termination letter. Just like that, my stability collapsed. I remember sitting in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel, trying not to cry. Jason supported me immediately. He told me not to rush into another job. He said he could handle all expenses until I found something better. He reassured me that I should focus on freelancing and building my portfolio. I was grateful, but something inside me started to feel smaller. I hated relying on someone else financially. I hated feeling like my independence was slipping away. Around that time, someone from my past reappeared. His name was Mark Reynolds. Mark and I went to college together. He was studying digital animation while I studied design. Back then, he had a crush on me, but I never took it seriously. We were friends, nothing more. He messaged me on social media after hearing about my job situation through mutual friends. He told me he had freelance connections and could help me find work. I hesitated at first. Jason didn't like me reconnecting with people from my past, especially male friends. but I told myself it was just professional. Mark and I started collaborating on small projects. We met in coffee shops, exchanged ideas, and slowly started talking about life again. Mark was completely different from Jason. He was emotional, spontaneous, messy, and deeply expressive. He asked how I felt, not just what I was doing. He wanted to know about my fears, my dreams, my frustrations. One evening, we worked late at his apartment on a branding project. It started raining outside, heavy and loud against the windows. We ordered pizza, played old indie music from college, and laughed about memories I hadn't thought about in years. At some point, Mark stopped talking and just looked at me. "You don't look happy," he said softly. I immediately denied it, but he kept looking at me like he could see straight through every lie I was telling myself. And suddenly, I started crying. I told him about losing my job, about feeling dependent on Jason, about how Jason had become emotionally distant even though he was physically present, about the constant feeling that I was being observed even though I couldn't explain why. Mark hugged me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Nothing happened that night, not physically, but something shifted inside me, something dangerous and fragile. After that, we started meeting more often. At first, I told Jason the truth that I was working with Mark. Jason didn't react aggressively. He simply asked a few quiet questions about him, then nodded. But over time, I started lying about how often we met. I told myself it was easier than explaining everything. The emotional connection between me and Mark grew fast. He made me feel understood in ways I hadn't felt in years. He told me I deserved to feel passionate about life again. He told me I deserved to be more than someone's responsibility. Then one night, he kissed me. I froze. Every alarm in my brain screamed at me to stop. But another voice whispered that I deserved to feel wanted, not just protected. I kissed him back. A week later, I crossed the line completely. I cheated on Jason. I remember every detail of that day. The smell of Mark's apartment candles, the sound of thunder outside, the overwhelming mixture of excitement and guilt twisting inside my chest. The moment it ended, guilt hit me like a physical wave. I felt sick. When I came home, Jason greeted me with dinner already prepared. He kissed my forehead and asked about my day. I could barely breathe. Our affair lasted 2 months. 2 months of lies, secret meetings, stolen moments, and constant fear. I lived 2 separate lives. With Jason, I played the role of a devoted girlfriend. With Mark, I became someone spontaneous, emotional, reckless. And then everything collapsed. One evening, I left my phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. When I came back, Jason was sitting on the couch, holding my phone. His expression wasn't angry, it was calm. Too calm. "Who is Mark?" he asked quietly. My entire body went cold. I knew instantly there was no way out. I confessed everything. I expected screaming. I expected rage. I expected him to throw me out. Instead, he said 3 words that terrified me more than any anger could have. I already knew. He walked into the bedroom and returned with a thick folder. Inside were printed screenshots of my conversations with Mark. Photos, call logs, location history. I stared at the evidence in horror. He told me he had installed surveillance software on my phone months earlier. I started yelling, accusing him of violating my privacy, of being controlling, of being insane. He listened silently. Then he told me about his past. His former fiancée had cheated on him days before their wedding. He said it destroyed him completely. After that, he started monitoring every partner he had, convinced betrayal was inevitable. He said he wasn't surprised by my cheating. He said he was just waiting. We argued until sunrise. Eventually, he told me he forgave me under one condition. I had to cut Mark out of my life completely. I agreed. I called Mark and told him everything was over. He stayed silent for a long time, then said something that still echoes in my head. "He's going to destroy you, Emily." I hung up. For a few weeks, Jason became incredibly affectionate. He bought gifts, planned romantic dinners, and constantly reassured me that we could rebuild trust. But gradually, his forgiveness turned into control. He checked my phone daily. He demanded my passwords. He insisted I delete social media. He tracked my location. He discouraged me from meeting friends, claiming he was worried about losing me again. I convinced myself I deserved this punishment. Then one afternoon, while Jason was at work, I found an old laptop hidden in the back of his closet. It wasn't locked. Inside was a folder labeled Archives. What I discovered inside shattered everything. There were videos recorded from hidden cameras inside the apartment, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. I watched footage of myself living my daily life without knowing I was being filmed. Then I found older folders. They contained recordings of other women, his exes, years of surveillance. My hands started shaking violently. At that exact moment, I heard the front door open. Jason had come home early. He walked into the room and saw me sitting in front of the laptop. Silence filled the air. I expected him to explode. Instead, he sighed deeply. "Now you understand," he said. He explained that he needed control to feel safe. That betrayal was inevitable. That monitoring his partners was his way of protecting himself. I told him I was leaving. He looked at me calmly and said, "No, you're not." Over the next few days, he confiscated my passport, froze my access to our shared bank account, and insisted it was temporary, just until I calmed down. I felt trapped. Terrified, desperate. Using an old email account Jason didn't know existed, I contacted Mark. I asked for help. He responded immediately. He told me he would come get me when Jason left for work. The morning of my escape, my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I packed a small bag. Every sound made my heart race. I kept expecting Jason to walk through the door early. When Mark texted that he was outside, I ran out of the apartment building without looking back. I collapsed into his car, crying uncontrollably, believing it was finally over. 5 minutes later, I saw Jason's car behind us. He followed us through multiple streets, staying close but never honking, never calling, just watching. Eventually, he cut us off at an intersection. He stepped out of his car and approached slowly. I was certain violence was about to happen. Instead, he leaned toward the window and looked directly into my eyes. "You'll come back," he said quietly. Then he returned to his car and drove away. I never saw him again. I moved to another city, changed my phone number, started therapy. Mark stayed by my side through everything, but our relationship never became romantic again. Too much pain, too much guilt, too many complicated memories stood between us. 2 years passed. I slowly rebuilt my life, found new work, made new friends, learned how to feel safe again, or at least I thought I had. Then 3 months ago, I received an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me standing outside my new apartment building, clearly taken from across the street. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, were 6 words. "I told you you'd come back." I don't know if it was really him. I don't know if I'm still being watched. But every night, before going to sleep, I check every corner of my apartment. I cover my laptop camera with tape. And sometimes, when I walk home alone, I swear I can feel someone watching me from a distance. Maybe this story is about betrayal. Maybe it's about obsession. Or maybe it's about how sometimes, the moment you think you're escaping danger is only the moment it finally reveals itself. And if you're wondering whether I regret cheating, yes, every single day. But not for the reasons you might think. Because if I hadn't cheated, I might still be living with him. And I might never have realized that I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a cage,